Alrighty, hello everyone. I'm a bit behind. I should have made this video last week, so I'm going to be making 2 videos this week. We're looking at criminal law and we're looking at involuntary manslaughter. So, involuntary manslaughter is where you didn't mean to kill someone, but you did. It's the same actus reus as murder. So, if you do something, remember the guilty act of murder is anything that kills someone. So that's the same for involuntary manslaughter. But the difference is in the mens rea, so the guilty mind. And it's got 2 categories. It's either an unlawful and dangerous act, or criminal negligence. So those are the 2 things that you can be punished for involuntary manslaughter for doing. Manslaughter, just in general, has the widest rate of punishments, probably out of any offence, according to my lecturer. All it says in the Crimes Act in section 24, where it talks about manslaughter, is that it carries a maximum penalty of 25 years, and the judge can override the jury in making a decision. The judge can acquit the accused if they want to. That's all it says about manslaughter. An unlawful and dangerous act, so we're looking at 2 types of mens reas for that now, is when I commit a crime, I intended to commit the crime was dangerous, and someone died because of it. Again, each element must be proven beyond reasonable doubt, and from an objective point of view. So the subjective mind doesn't count in this instance. And the case here is Wilson v. the Queen. Now, I don't really understand why Wilson's at fault in this case, but I'm not the law. As the story goes, we're talking about this in my tutorial. Wilson was kind of on the grog a bit. There was this homeless guy on the way home. They got talking, and Wilson got mad at this dude and punched him in the head. The guy hit the floor. I think he hit it against the concrete, and then Wilson calls his mate, coming. We're all adults here. And then coming, grabbed the guy's head and bashed it against the concrete twice. The guy ended up dying, and Wilson was found guilty of, as in the first guy punched the homeless guy, he was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter because the brain damage from the initial punch apparently is what killed the guy. So his acts, the punch, that was unlawful, and he intended to do it, and it was dangerous, and the guy died as a result. So an unlawful and dangerous act, which they intended to do, but they didn't intend death, but death happened anyway. Unlawful acts are criminal acts, not regulations or rules. So Pemble versus the Queen is a case where Pemble, we've got the double lines. You can overtake on the dotted lines, but with double lines you can't. Pemble crossed the double line, hit someone, and then that person died, and the question was whether that constituted an unlawful act. But because he didn't break a law, he broke a regulation, he sort of got off the hook. He sort of got off the hook a little bit. I believe in this instance, though I'm not sure, I haven't looked too far into it, that he'd be probably done of committing a traffic offence. He might have something on his licence, but it'd probably just be deemed a freak accident, though I don't know. Dangerous acts are objectively determined and can include exposing anyone to a risk of serious injury. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So, if a strongman's coming towards me, he's about to take a swing at me, and then I grab my brother and I put him in front of me, and then if the strongman comes and whacks my brother, probably the strongman will be accused of a dangerous act. But I also probably could be, because I used my brother as a meat shield. Ivy Wills, I'm not too sure what happened in this instance, I'm not even gonna lie, but yeah, like if I was to tie someone to a chair and then set the house on fire, that's the house that they're in on fire, then that's probably a dangerous act. Yeah, that's subjectively determined, so whatever a reasonable person thinks is dangerous will become dangerous. A reasonable person, this is a test that we use, is always sober and unbiased, but can inherit the age or an intellectual disability of the defendant. So basically, like if I'm drunk and I commit a crime, then that would not be taken into account because the reasonable person is not drunk. So Ivy Thomas is the precedent there. There's a case real recently, Ivy White, where there's this policeman. His name was, I think, Christian White, and he went into this nursery home, and this lady was holding a knife, and the lady was, a fair distance away, and White was like, "Whoa, get back, drop the knife, whatever." White tased the lady and killed her to death. So police can use reasonable force. Again, there's that objective term right there. In their jobs under the Law Enforcement Act 2002, but once they go more than using reasonable force, then they're just treated like everyone else. So I think White was found guilty of manslaughter in this instance. Manslaughter, one that doesn't have intent to kill. So remember, for murder, the mens rea is either intent to kill, reckless indifference for human life, or intent for grievous bodily harm. So if you don't intend to do that, but you still commit a crime where someone dies and that crime was dangerous, then you're guilty of UDA manslaughter. Criminal negligence is manslaughter where an objective and reasonable person would have taken action, but the defendant didn't, and the defendant must knowingly not take action, and the defendant must have a duty of care to the deceased, and they must, under Knighton versus the Queen, have fallen greatly short of the standard of care that a reasonable person would take, where falling short would cause a high risk of death or grievous bodily harm. So, R.V. Lavender, that's the case we looked at for murder or criminal responsibility, one of them, where basically there was this guy driving around on a mining site. He had like a digger or a high-powered machinery, and a couple of teenagers were, running through the fields, scampering away. So this guy was chasing after them in his truck, going, "Hey guys, get off. This is dangerous. You don't want to be here." And then as he was driving around, he drove off the mining site, and then drove into some shrubbery. And as he was like, "Hey guys, get away. You're gonna die," he accidentally killed someone. And so that's criminal negligence. So he didn't have a bad intention, but objectively speaking, that he took unreasonable action. He had a duty of care to these kids, just by virtue of the fact that he's a person, and so are the kids. And he fell gravely short of that duty of care. He was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. So negligence is an objective test under this case, where the reasonable person inherits age and experience, knowledge and circumstance of the accused, but not their mental state. That's right. So what this also states is that the jury has to assume that they've got the same level of knowledge as the accused. So let's say the accused is a doctor, and they had certain medical procedures that they were following, and then the doctor, didn't follow a certain procedure. Then the jury would inherit that experience. They wouldn't say, "Oh, well, I couldn't do that, therefore the doctor is guilty." They'd have to assume that they were the doctor, and then they'd have to decide whether it was a mistake or whether it was a mistake that fell greatly short of the standard of care, or whether it was just a mistake that anyone could have made. Inherit the experience and knowledge. R.V. Strews is a case that we looked at where there was this cult up in Queensland, and the cult had a diabetic daughter. This is probably the best case that helped the idea of negligence sit in my head. So two parents had this diabetic daughter, and instead of giving her things like insulin or taking her to the doctor or taking her to the hospital, they instead decided that they were just going to pray for her. God, please heal our girl. We're not going to do anything about it because we have ultimate faith in you. And then the girl ended up dying. And then all members of the cult, not just the parents, all members were found guilty of criminally negligent manslaughter. And it goes to show that even though you might believe something to be the right thing to do, you might think that praying in faith will heal your daughter, but if you don't take any actual, let's say legally recognized steps towards fixing the problem, and then the person dies, then you'll be guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The duty to act supersedes religious beliefs. That's what this sort of thing says. So basically you can still pray and you can hope to God that the daughter gets better, but if you don't call the doctor, you don't take her to the hospital, and then she dies, then you're guilty of involuntary manslaughter. There was a case that we looked at in class. It was a similar scenario where this lady was a qualified homeopath. This is just a scenario. And she had a daughter who was asthmatic, had asthma, and then instead of taking her to the doctor, getting her a puff or whatever, she used her homeopathy skills to try and help the girl. The girl ended up getting worse and died. And it was found that because homeopathy, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, is it's a supplementary healthcare. It's not like the main thing, and so because of that, we all decided that she was criminally negligent in that instance. yeah, that's what that is. Criminally negligent manslaughter. When the defendant had a standard of care and they towards the deceased, and the standard of care was and they fell greatly short of performing the standard of care. So, thank you for listening.